I want to look at the concept of the quality of touch in an art such as Taiji. Now, talking about this is probably one of the most niche talks that I've done in the public. I'm aware of that because a lot of people are not interested in the quality of touch. And what I mean by that is, say you're doing something like, well, let's stick within the platform of push hands. Let's not even talk about grappling or anything. Let's only talk within push hands. So within Treisho or push hands, obviously you are making contact with an opponent. Usually their arms, sometimes their body or whatever, but usually there's a bridge with the arms when you start. So there is a difference between studying the technique that you're doing or studying the quality of touch. The technique that you're doing is more about, do I yield to the right or underhook the arm, or do I press them down or send them out? It's the shape of the technique, the body strategy that you are doing. And many people, their push hands is focused on this. Nothing wrong with it, but it's not the side of push hands that I'm going to talk about now. Because whilst you do need to learn techniques, there is another side to it, which is the quality of touch, which is what happens at the point of contact between you and the other person. Now, in the case of push hands people that are very, very much only focused upon technique to the sort of exclusion of the quality of touch, then the quality of touch is almost irrelevant. So therefore what happens is, it's more like a sort of physical confrontation where you're not taking any subtlety into account at all. So the person pushes on you and I think I yield here and I push and bang. And it's all about that kind of like, what are you doing in response to the other person in a very conventional fashion. Now, of course, within something like Taiji, actually there is another aspect to it. And this very much corresponds within Taiji to something called stick, adhere, join, follow. These kind of phrases or this way of understanding how two people relate to each other. So whilst you still might need the technique, the ability to understand what to do with your hands and your arms and your waist and your legs, there is another thing that happens on a subtler level when you touch, and stick, adhere, join, follow is about the quality of touch. So if we step across into the more woo-woo side of Taiji, to use the somewhat cheesy phrase that people have adopted to discuss it, obviously another side of push hands is the strange phenomena you see where people bounce each other or take them to the floor with no effort or make a small movement and the other person is stuck to them or whatever. I'm sure you've seen them, these kind of demonstrations in push hands. And of course the feedback from people who are not within that particular crowd is, that's nonsense, it's fake, it's compliant, or it's made up, or whatever, or it doesn't work under pressure, those kind of things. Now my take, and of course the other side is the woo-woo camp, if you want, would always say, no, it's definitely real, and you need to touch it to experience it, to know what it is, or that kind of stuff. And then of course there's head clash in between the two. Now me personally, I sit in both camps. As in, there is a real phenomena that's studied at the quality of touch, of course there is, but to actually take that esoteric side of push hands or that kind of deeper side of push hands and then make it fully compliant within a martial context is actually very, very difficult. It's incredibly difficult. So the compliancy that is needed within push hands is not, I make a movement and you deliberately fall over or jump back. It's not that. Generally the compliance is two things. One, we're staying within a preset drill for a really long time. A really, really long time you have to stay within a preset drill. You can't have someone throwing a fist at you or trying to do a double leg takedown for a really, really long time because of the added complexity of the randomness of that kind of encounter. After a while you can, but for a really, really long time you have to stay within that. And I think the length of time that you have to stay within that kind of preset drill is what discounts internal force of this kind with this high quality of touch from a fully combative arena, of course. And then the second thing that you require is to understand the nature of what stick, adhere, join, follow means, or at least some of those aspects. Or let's take that phrase out, actually. Let's take that phrase out. Let's say the second part of it is you just have to understand what is the actual mechanism of what is happening at the quality of touch. Not the bounce, not the launch, not the fajir, none of those things, but literally the quality of touch. What takes place in both people's bodies. And sometimes I don't think that's studied enough. If you understand what is taking place within both people's bodies when you touch, you can understand why a lot of this sort of push hands, this woo-woo push hands, is actually, I kind of agree with the non-woo group that actually it is kind of It's kind of silly. Or it's silly if you pretend that it can be applied within a martial context. So I guess I kind of a fence sitter in that I can agree with both camps. It is a real phenomena, but it is not fighting. But there is, if you understand how to navigate some of the complexities of push hands, there is a way to start using it so that it transfers over towards a non-compliant setting, of course. But as with any of these kind of thin paths, if you like, there are many ways to step off of this path and create a mess up. An example being empty force, Ling Kong Jin, where people are pushing each other without contact. You know, someone moves their hands and the other one falls over. Like this is definitely stepped off of the path, and I'll explain why. It's an error. Empty force is the biggest error you can study within Taiji push hands if you really want to. Well, there's an error in two ways. One, you can never apply it in a non-compliant setting. Let's never pretend that you can, because you require the physicality of your body to be there in order to even engage with that side of training. And the second side of it is it doesn't do anything for you, so it's not even a cultivation practice. So I'll explain why. Or I try. I try to make this simple. Or no, not simple, that's not fair. That's not fair. I try to make it clear. So this is the bit that's going to sound a bit strange. Obviously, we have a few components inside our body that we're using to touch the person in a particular way, you know, to make contact with their arms, make contact with their bridge. And these components are your nervous system, which you're feeling, of course. And then, of course, we have all of the malleable tissues that exist around it. And then, of course, we have the structural stuff, the bones, the tendons, and all that kind of stuff, you know, the stuff that gives us the shape and structure of our posture. Now, internal mechanics rely very much upon getting all of the soft stuff to mobilize individually from the denser stuff. So what does this mean? If I move externally, I contract my muscles, small muscles, I contract my muscles and I mobilize my skeleton like levers, okay? So it's muscle contracting, bones moving, and that's external movement, right? And of course there's many other complexities, but that's the basis of external movement. It's based on leverage and contraction, primarily. And then if I want a good posture and a good structure, I line up the bones properly and I build more muscular strength and I get more efficient with those movements, and that's the study of external movement. It's great, like highly fantastic. You know, there's a lifetime of study there alone before you even go into anything deeper. But then there is something else. There is internal movement. Internal movement. Now, all teachers will explain internal movement slightly different, of course. But one of the core components to it is the utilization of qi. And this is where in push hands, maybe my definition differs from others, because when the qi is not used to hit the opponent, that is not the aim. It's not some substance that comes out of my body and hits them. Now, at the same time, I'm not saying that qi cannot be emitted, because it definitely can, but qi is emitted in more of a therapeutic setting or for something else, and it is a different paradigm, but it is not used in push hands. And of course, there will be 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million, whatever, who can probably break that rule, but generally within the sort of push hands platform, that's not what we're doing. We're not sending the qi out, okay? It's not fa qi, it's not to emit the qi from the body, not for the majority of cases. But we still require the qi. So if I'm pushing hands with someone and I neutralize and I lift their feet, bonk, and bounce them away, say, put in, I have not issued my qi into their body in order to do that. Not at all. There is no qi coming out of me. It's not that kind of thing. What has happened is I am utilizing my own qi within my own body. That is what I'm doing. The qi inside my body enables various things to take place inside my own body to create that particular response. And this is why. You have different forms of qi. But one of the forms of qi that is used very extensively at the beginning is the energy within your nerves. And the energy within your nerves is obviously of an electrical conductivity within the nerves that is used to contract the muscles and what have you. But there is a stage within internal arts where you build enough qi by sinking it, spreading it, whatever, so that the nerves have a different relationship to the inside of your body, right? So rather than just contracting the muscles, what happens is my nerves will enable all of the tissues inside my body to move. Now, already that can sound a bit esoteric, but it's not really. I mean, it's not really that strange. It works like this. You have this phrase in Tai Chi which is bones up, flesh down, meaning that you separate the flesh from the bone, and then we stretch all of the tissues on the inside of the body, what is sometimes called the silk, that might be reeled or it might be pulled depending upon the tradition. Sometimes they talk about the strings and the threads and everything and these pulling. These are all the sort of tissues inside that are according to the theory of internal arts, initially kind of welded together and stuck to your bones. So what we do in the arts is we stretch and we open and we sink and we hang the flesh off the bones, and we basically separate the muscular, all of the flesh. Let's just stay with flesh, don't need any other words. We separate the flesh from the bones. Okay, so if the flesh is on the bone, it's pulled off, and in between all of that, all these fibers start to open up. This is a really important part of Tai Chi, and this is why you see all the loosening exercises and the stretching and the pulling and the sinking and releasing and getting all of the flesh off of the bone. Once it is pulled off and you say your body is open, then we start to fill the body up. Now, as much as anything, to fill the body means that my nerves, if you like, receive more connection between my mind and more connection with the qi. So I build the qi up, meaning the energy that flows through the nerves takes on a slightly different quality, and it gives you a much higher degree of sensitivity through your body. You'll feel it. It's obviously not literally what's happening, but the subjective experience is that my mind flows through all the pathway of the nerves. That's what it feels like. So rather than just feeling, like tactile pressure, the feel of the couch or whatever, what I feel is like a low thrumming, if you want, for want of a better word, of sensitivity and movement, sensation running all the way through all my nerves, all across my body. Now at this stage, we say that you've built more qi, and it's not enough qi that, you can telekinetically move objects or knock King Gong over from the other side of the room or something. It's not that kind of thing. It just means that the level of connection between my awareness or my attention and my nerves and my body is to a higher degree. I have increased the heightened connection between my mind and my body. So if that sounds esoteric at this stage, then I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't think that's a particularly esoteric thing. Your nerves are functioning more in a different fashion because of the way you're getting your mind and your body to connect. Now at this stage, this is where it gets a bit weird. It means that when I either think, change an intention, or pay attention, or release a quality of my mind, meaning to let go, that parts of the nerves, the energy I'm building, will mobilize the tissues on the inside. So the inside of my body will start to move. The flesh will move. And often what it does is stretch rather than contract. So what you end up with is minimal, let's say, conventional muscle holding your body where it is, because you still need some muscle, of course. You need something to hold you up. You have minimal conventional muscle, but you have lots of movement of this flesh on the inside, kind of mobilizing. So muscle, or standard muscle, works brain nerve contraction, right? If I do that with my arm, brain nerve contraction. I pick up an object, brain nerve contraction, blah, blah, blah. Bones move like levers, as far as I understand science anyway. The other side of it is a particular quality of thought and attention causes the tissues on the inside to stretch. So instead of the muscles contracting to generate a movement, things start to lengthen. And this is what they call the silk or the brocade or whatever, like long fibers being pulled through your body under the actions of the qi. Okay, so that's at least a physiological basis to the start of internal mechanics. So that being said, that little bit of background knowledge maybe to how it works or how we're mobilizing the inside then leads us to an interesting phenomena. And this is something that I've mentioned a lot, and also one of the previous podcasts was discussing, I was having a conversation with a lady called Cindy Engel, a friend of mine who has done a lot more study in this particular area of human physiology, so please feel free to watch that podcast or look her up, and that is somatic empathy, the ability for one nervous system to copy the other nervous system of another creature. So going into it very briefly, my simple understanding would be that in nature, two animals would encounter each other, and the way that one animal can understand what the other animal is thinking, say two dogs encounter each other, is of course they have scent, smell, maybe limited barking or noise ability to understand each other. But one of the main ways is that animals have the ability for when two animals are next to each other, their nervous systems will kind of sync up, like sort of going into harmony with one another. And then because that is happening, then one dog will feel what the other dog is feeling, literally. So if I have a load of sensations across my body, and then somebody is able to do this with their nervous system, then they will feel what I am feeling inside their body, and that's somatic empathy. And animals use it because obviously they have less linguistic communication, less complex, so they can basically attune into each other and know what the other animal is feeling. And all across the animal kingdom this is taking place. Now within animals this is taking place to varying, to humans, sorry, within humans this is happening to varying degrees as well. It's a skill that many of us have kind of lost because we intellectualize things and communicate through language instead, verbal language, body language if you like. But there is a certain degree to which that happens, which is why if you're ever around someone who's in a very, very heightened emotional state, it's not long before you can feel in a heightened emotional state. And sometimes if you're around someone for long enough, like their heightened emotional state might be creating chemical changes within their body, hormones and things, and then after a while your change in your nervous system state starts to change as well, and then you start to get the same thing taking place, and in this way kind of mental states and even physical conditions can be passed on. You get things like therapists and healers using it because they'll lay hands on a patient and go into a particular state, a very relaxed state, allowing the nerves to just rearrange to what the patient is doing, and then they will feel in their body what the patient is feeling, and there's a form of diagnosis there. I know acupuncturists who use this extensively. I know body workers that use this extensively. It's not an unusual phenomenon within human beings, and I think almost all of us have experienced it to some extent. We've all walked into a room and felt like we could cut the atmosphere with a knife. And realistically, because you're picking up the mood, and I think realistically you have to be pretty dense to have never experienced this in your life whatsoever. And that's what it is, the ability of your nervous system to adjust according to somebody else's, to line up with them and tune into what they're feeling. So like I say, I think it's a normal phenomena. So then we can take that further, is that if I take those nerves and I combine it with a mobile interior body, the flesh moving, then what it means is not only will my nervous system pick up what the other person is feeling, like they might have a headache, I get a little bit of a, we get a lesser version of a pressure in my head or something, But now what will happen is my nervous system will change to their nervous system, and because the nerves and the chi and the insides will change together, it means my body can literally reshape according to what it's feeling. So if, for example, my nervous system is picking up off of someone else's and there's a lot of pressure, I don't know, whatever, here on my ribs. Okay, maybe something on my nerves is changing here inside my ribs. Because of the training I've done to mobilize the insides, then the inside of my body will start to change as well. So the tissues will stretch and my body will literally reorganize itself. So the reorganization of your body in this sense is essentially the somatic empathy between two people taken a step further, so that as your nerves pick up what the other person's nerves are feeling, your body will reorganize on a physical level to express what your nerves are doing. Hope that makes sense. So what it can mean is, on a simplistic level, if somebody has a bad posture, say, and I'm around them and that bad posture is causing them a lot of pain, somebody whose nervous system and body is not synced up, say, what might happen is they start to feel the pain of the other person, and lots of therapists are like this. Where if somebody has mobilized the inside of their body very, very well and connected it up, then when they start to feel the pain, maybe their body will also start to reorganize to match the posture of the other person, which is obviously not a good thing, but it's a mechanic that might take place. So I hope I've lost you already. I'll simplify it. Internal arts, with regards to the quality of touch, is largely to get your nervous system to mobilize your body so that it can move and rearrange according to information that it's receiving. External bodies can't do that, as in ones that haven't been trained internally, because the insides don't move properly. Internally open and mobile bodies can do that. Now, a part of the reason that this becomes irrelevant is this is where the quality of touch comes in, the quality of touch. Because in, say, push hands, if I put my hands onto another person, the mistake people make in push hands at this level, practicing this kind of esoteric style of touch, not combat. Remember, I'm really separating the two, so that really we're studying an interesting phenomena rather than trying to win in a competitive arena. I think that if you're going to win in a competitive arena, you have to train that kind of technique-based competitive stuff as well, because otherwise you're only honing in on one very, very specific mechanic, and that's a mistake, which is why when people hone in on this very specific mechanic and they become very good, they get overconfident. don't know why, overconfidence plus delusion, and then they enter a competitive arena and then just lose, because you can't hone in on one very specific esoteric woo-woo kind of mechanic and then expect it to pass over into the reality of someone trying to punch you in the head or tackle you to the ground or something like that. You have to train combat to engage in combat, basically. So I'm not talking about that. I'm only talking very specifically about this quality of touch. So what happens when you touch the other person's being like this? The mistake people make is they try to do things to the other person. You know, like, I will throw your body away. I will bounce you. I will knock you to the floor. I will yield to your power, pull your arm. Like, you're trying to do something to them. And actually, internal arts are based more on what happens inside you, not what happens inside them. So the idea is, when you put your hands on them, you need to join with them. Okay, and I'm not talking stick it here, join, follow. I mean in a more general sense. So when you touch the other person's arms or you make contact with them, the idea is that your nerves, because you've trained internally, can, to a high level, hopefully, lots of chi, lots of mobility of the insides, because the chi, remember, mobilizes the tissues and the nerves. The chi is the bridge between your attention, the energy in your nerves, and the soft tissues in Taiji. Primarily at this stage what we're using it for. That's why we need the chi, it's the translator. So I touch the person's arms, and then what happens is the inside of my body starts to adjust to harmonize with their nerves. That's really what it is about. It's harmonizing with them so that you join with them, so that you essentially become one unit. So you can think of it like this. If there's many variables in my body and many variables in their body, when we touch, the variables keep us separate. So we are two separate entities. So if I push or pull or twist, we are two separate entities working together. Or working apart, I should say. If, however, I'm able to touch, and because there's enough chi inside my body, all the tissues will start to mobilize and rearrange my body. And sometimes it's not visible on the outside, or often it's not. But inside you'll feel it. There's an adjustment process. What it's doing is syncing up the properties of your body with their body, so that you are now connected, and now you are joined. At this stage, the level of joining creates a kind of neutralization of the other person's power, and then you have an interesting place to push hands from. And this is what your quality of touch should do. So if you look at many of the classics within Taiji, what do they talk about? They talk about joining with a person, becoming one with them. They don't know you, but you know them. Why do you know them? Because the inside of your body is synced up with theirs. They talk about there being a sort of harmonization between the two. You are neutralizing or nullifying their power. Why are you nullifying their power? It's not a technique or a dodge or like many martial arts would do. You are nullifying that power because you've synced up with their nervous system, so there's no differential between you. And of course, one of the experiences in push hands is if you touched and your body has adjusted to match theirs, then what happens is when they push, they can't get power on you and stuff. It's very weird, like their power is neutralized. And the explanation students often give is, it's like, I can't push you or something. And it's just this weird thing that when you sync up, the lack of differential, the lack of separation between the two of you at the point of touch means they can't get power. So then they have to kind of adjust their position or change their position to get power. Okay, so maybe they're pushing in, they can't get power, so they're like, they have to adjust to try and get power again. So then the skill is, how quick can you maintain your quality of touch and keep changing inside to stay within harmony with them? Now, of course, it's very hard because chi doesn't move fast. Nerves don't change particularly fast. Tissues don't change particularly fast, not at the beginning, which is why you have to go slow. The person has to change slow, you have to change slow to stay harmonized. And then, of course, you pick the speed up. But to do it full speed, like competitive push hand speed, that is not easy at all. To have somebody touching you and suddenly change speed, like the speed you have to change inside is incredible. And some people can do it. There are a small percentage of people who get to that stage, but many people cannot. And many people don't really want to. Many people are studying a phenomena to understand how they work rather than trying to apply it to combat. And a part of the difficulty for the jump to combat is simply the level of unpredictability of your partner, of course, or opponent, because they can do anything they want to, and also partially because of the speed, the sheer speed of it. So me personally, I can only talk for me on a practical level. Although combat's not the most interesting side of it for me, I'm also aware that as a martial arts teacher I should be expected to be able to deal with that. So I train both things. I train the esoteric and the woo because I'm very, very fascinated in that quality of touch. But I also train wrestling and striking and all of those things too, because I also recognize that at some point it might be useful for me to be able to stand up for myself or defeat someone. But what I did for a long time was compartmentalize them, and then any coming together of those two things has happened as a byproduct over time. But I still would never pretend that the level, because I'm an honest person, I would never, or I try to be, I would never take the esoteric side and pretend I could fully make that a weapon, because I'm not at that level. There always has to be some reliance on martial techniques as well, you know. So I just want to be really clear on that, that side of things. But I'm also not making the mistake of only studying the esoteric and not doing the martial, and then thinking that you could apply it martially, because that's a very unrealistic thing. The skill of footwork and distancing and timing and power of delivery, don't ever underestimate that. If you're someone that only does Tai Chi push hands and you think it's going to apply to combat, then I hope you never have to test it, or it'll go badly. Or I hope you do test it, then you get woken up. So, quality touch. Why am I discussing this? And I'm aware this is probably a very niche topic, because I don't know. I mean, I know the people I teach, I know what they know. I don't know what people I don't teach know. I don't know what people are doing, and I don't know how much of this makes sense. I don't know how much of this idea of the insides moving makes sense to you. I don't know how much about the quality of touch makes sense to you. So maybe this is a really niche one. I'm not sure, but we'll see. So, touch is what I want to talk about. So, touching the other person inside of you changes to harmonize, and there's all kinds of variables inside. Cavities change, ribs move, diaphragms move, things tense, things release. So you'll harmonize with the other person to achieve harmony with them, right? Neutrality, if you like. Then the next stage after this is, of course, that if I'm harmonized with them, when they then make a change, can I remain harmonized until they get to such a point where their power kind of locks or freezes, and this is what creates the reaction back in them. Because if you look at people that are either going to the floor or bouncing back, they're locked, aren't they? They're kind of locked in their arms or locked in their legs, and you can see there's like a tension in the other person's body that's out of their control in the majority of cases. Now, part of the reason that locking is there inside their body is because you've harmonized with their nervous system, not them harmonizing with you. You've harmonized with them. Then when they try to move, they can't get their power, and instead that power kind of goes back into them and causes a contraction, and this is what catches them. Right? A very, very fascinating phenomena. Absolutely fascinating how two human beings can do this, or at least one person's nervous system can do it if they can sync up. Now this means that if you're going to study this side of push hands, which I think is a fascinating thing to dedicate your time to, and also very interesting, it becomes a form of Qigong, because the more malleable I make the body, the more the insides open up, the better for me it is. The more chi I can build, the better for me it is. The better for it is my cultivation and everything like this. The more I can stick and join and harmonize with the other person, the more my awareness has to go into the body and stabilize. So actually a very good meditative practice to teach a level of stability in the mind. And all of those things are the benefits that come out of that side of training. So I'm totally pro all of this. And if you're going to go into that and explore this, then you want to keep it on a path that's useful. Because if you are doing the things inside you, you're the one that's changing, you're the one that's harmonizing, you're the one that's listening, you're the one that's adjusting, then it is useful for you. But if you are trying to do things in the other person's body, then it is not useful for you. It's not useful for you, because you're not changing. So say I have a method where I want to touch them and then, I don't know, whatever people try to do, send the chi in and cause their body to contract, send the chi in to contract their joints, send the chi in. You're not doing anything to you, you're only doing it to them. Even if you could do it, I mean, I don't think you can do it, but if you could do it, you're not really doing anything for you. It's not changing you, so therefore your push hands is not useful. So your push hands, this type of push hands, not the wrestling type, this type of push hands only becomes about what tricks can I do to the other person, but I don't change. I don't build more chi, I don't build more awareness, I don't build more malleability on the inside, I don't build more mental stability, more harmony. Instead, I just learn to create reactions. And a lot of the sort of Taiji, Fajin push hands community, in my opinion, is kind of going down that route. So what you end up with is people just wanting to do tricks that look good on video and stuff like that, but they're not really getting anything from it. And also, if nothing else, in order to generate those tricks in those people, this is where the compliance would come in. Say I don't have any ability to harmonize, which there are many Tai Chi teachers who don't have the ability to do that, but they do Fajin. If I have no ability to mobilize the inside of my body, what it means is I'm relying on the other person being able to do it. So when I touch them, they sync up to me. but they sync up to me in a passive fashion. And part of the reason they sync up to me in a passive fashion is because they're the student and I'm the dominant one in this experience, or they are people pleasers, or they think that's what they're supposed to do, or something like that. So then what you get is teachers talk about, well, I can do it on this person because they're sensitive, and I can't do it on that person because they're not sensitive. What does that mean? And you will see teachers say, well, they need to have more chi, so they're not good enough for me to fudge in. Well, what does that mean? What is it sensitive? We're not talking emotionally sensitive, definitely not. And we're not talking like, oh, I can feel the chi or something. What we mean is they are more somatically empathetic, meaning the sensitive ones are the ones that nerves are more likely to copy my system. So if I touch hands with them and I say this is a sensitive person, you might come up with all kinds of stories. This person has more energy, this one is in a different etheric realm, this one has a different karma. Actually what it means is normally their nervous system is a bit more mobile. So if they touch hands with me, I don't do anything, but they are sensitive, their nerves will rearrange their body. Now because maybe they're not as good as me, they won't go into harmony, they don't quite know how to get the quality of touch right, so they'll just kind of adjust and then they'll bounce off, they'll launch. Have I gained? No, because I haven't done anything inside me. I didn't join with them. I forced them to join with me, or they naturally joined with me. Do they get any benefit? Not really, because, well, they didn't move towards harmony. So all that happened was they shifted around a lot and then fell over. And then if you touch someone who's insensitive, not sensitive, and nothing happens to them, really it's because they're not somatically empathetic. They're not wired that way. One is not better or worse. This is the issue. It's just people are different. So it means that when they touch with you, there's no mobilization whatsoever and you can't get them. It's also why people will get more able to be fajined the more they do internal arts, because someone comes and they haven't mobilized the insides, obviously they can't harmonize with you. But if they do a year of Tai Chi, 2 years of Tai Chi, whatever, maybe even a month, depends how much you help them. When you touch hands and now they sync up with you and now you can bounce them away. And you'll see this if you go on sort of teachers demonstrations on YouTube. I'm probably spilling the beans here, aren't I? And you see teachers demonstrating like bouncing things over a period of time. Watch their videos over 6 months. Okay, not everyone, just periodically. You'll see the same student be used. Okay, the same student appear in the video, but the same student on video 1 maybe has a little reaction, enough that the teacher thought it was wise to film them, it would look cool. Watch the same student 3 months later, and then the same student 6 months later in that teacher's videos. That same student will now fly further. 6 months later, he'll fly much further. A year later, you can do mystical tricks with him, because of course that student has been learning to mobilize the insides of their body according to the internal arts, meaning that naturally when you touch them, they will adjust on the inside, and because they don't necessarily understand harmony, they become a much more easy to bounce out. So the student is becoming primed. It's not a deliberate thing by the teacher necessarily, it's just a natural development of the arts that they learn to get their nerves to open up more, so they're more easy to catch. So I'm anti this. I'm anti this because again, when you watch those people, it's not the teacher that is joining. I want to make that clear. The teacher is not touching and joining with them. The teacher is making them touch and join with you. So there is no change on the inside. So the teacher is not getting any benefit, or the practitioner is not getting any benefit. So what I advocate for is, when people are learning that side of push hands, is you do everything within your body. You learn to touch, experience the quality of the other person's body, but then you don't adjust them. Let them be. You adjust on the inside of you, so that you are the one that's getting the transformation benefit, and then you can do your push hands after that. If you are not changing, you are letting them just become compliant and change, then you're not getting any benefit from it. And neither are they, because they're learning to be submissive. So this is one of those paths that push hands walks, and I think that, and I've made that error, I've been down that route and back and forth and trying to, anyone who explores this kind of side of the arts will have to, sorry, I'm checking the time, I've got to be somewhere. You will have to walk this path and learn these errors themselves, I guess. So I'm just trying to give pointers that all your change must happen and you are the one that's joining. So then you get like the ultimate example of what I'm saying, of the teachers not doing anything, but the practitioner's not doing anything, their partner is empty force, where you see someone stand or in a Tai Chi posture, or maybe just and the teacher will put their hand near them and pull them over or push them down to the ground without touching them. Do that with the arms and the student will fly away. And it looks amazing. It looks like the teacher has sent out chi to impact them. Now there is something a bit like that in qi emission. So it's a little bit of a different thing, but I'm talking specifically in Taiji, okay, the empty force. Now actually what is happening is the ultimate example of Taiji being done wrong, push hands being done wrong, because the teacher's body, in order to create empty force, has to do nothing at all, because it's all done in the student or the receiver's body. So if the student or the receiver is stood in, I don't know, a jamjong or something like that, and you put your hand in front of them, say, and they're really somatically empathetic, meaning, you know what I mean by that, their nerves can mobilize all the insides really well. If you do this with your hand, they'll perceive the movement of the hand, and then the nerves will start to copy what your hand is doing. So the change is created. They're trying to empathize with the movement that they're seeing, and the result is that then they can be pushed or pulled or fallen over. So they're not doing it intellectually, they're not deliberately falling over, but because they are empathizing with something they're seeing, their body is changing, and that's what creates a reaction. And you can see people do examples of this, like walk towards me to push hands, and just as they're about to get to you, he does this with his arms, and the student flies away and runs across the room or something. It's somatic empathy in the student. That it is a person, the student is someone who has nerves, qi, and mobile tissues. So when they see the teacher do this with their hands, their body goes whoop, 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 like the nerves change, throws them out of balance, and then they get thrown out. So there is no qi coming from the issuer to the receiver. Nothing is coming out of the issuer's body. They always say they will. They're like, I'm sending my qi out. You're not. You're not sending your qi out. You're doing a movement with your body. This is why, as an experiment to that, I could get people to do this with empty force. They come to touch me, I do that with my hands, and they fall over. Okay, great. They didn't touch me, but they fell over. I looked like a magician or a Jedi or something. But then I stand that student up, and then I take another person who's never done any training, replace me with them, get them to do the same hand movements, and the student will still fall over. The person receiving will fall over. Why has this brand new person got empty force? In fact, I've even seen that as a demonstration. Like, look how good the teacher is. I take a random person, stand them in front of the same receiver. They'll do something like touch them on the back to give them qi or some mystical story. And then when the new person does the move, the person falls over just the same. Obviously, the issuer has not learnt any skill. There's nothing that's changed. How can they in the space of 3 seconds? So therefore everything is being done in the receiver, meaning that their somatic empathy is causing change inside their body. So it's not, they're not being compliant on an intellectual level. They're not thinking I'll fall over. They're being compliant because their body is prepped and primed in order to emulate the movements that they're seeing in front. This is why you can't empty force anybody. You can only empty force the ones who've done that kind of training, so their body is open up. So empty force Linkongjin to me is the no touch stuff. It's the worst route your push hands can go down, or your Taiji, because if you start going down that route, then you are essentially, it's like you're outsourcing all of your cultivation, and it's all happening in other people's body, but you're not changing. You don't have to do anything. And often it leads to delusion as well, because people think they're then sending qi out or something, which is really not what they're doing. I've never seen a Tai Chi push hands empty force demo that I thought was any good. I always thought that it was this, you know, like it's something in the student's body. So it brings you to an interesting thing, that the push hands and studying the quality of touch can be a very authentic cultivation for you, or it can be completely pointless. It depends what you do. Whereas if you actually take the technique style of push hands, in a controversial argument here, if I'm grappling and I'm wrestling and I move my hip and I pull that arm and I'm learning to flip that person over my hip with a hip throw, it's more honest. I mean, I don't really think it's push hands in a proper sense, but it's more honest because the visceral practice of physical work means it's real, whereas the subtle touch moving the people has a higher degree chance of you becoming deluded and moving down a route where you're just making students really receptive to you and then just moving hands, you know, which is definitely far more dangerous, far more of a risk of your practice becoming pointless, you know. An empty force is the ultimate. Linkongjin, no touch stuff, is the ultimate pointless. As soon as I see a Taiji teacher going down that route, I kind of know that they're lost. They're lost, and they either don't understand the mechanics behind why push hands works, or they do understand, and there's an ulterior motive for it that might be based in ego, power, or control, or something like this. So this is why I want to make this video, to explain, so that maybe, or at least my opinion of what's going on, you know. Like I say, there is a similar phenomena within Qigong actually, where you'll see, but it's a little different, where there is a way to issue Qi into the other person and they start to move. But that's a slightly separate thing. And it's not used within a push hands shape. And the difference is as well the time it takes to do. Someone will have to stand for, you might have to issue Qi into their body for 5 minutes, and then it's a different thing. The only reason I bring it up is so you understand I do believe Qi can come out, but it is not what is being done push hands, because the sheer speed of that reaction is not how Qi moves. Qi takes a long time because it has to build a field and entrain someone, and then it starts to, it's a different thing. Okay, Qi emission is a whole other topic. But the push hands highly fast, and the person falls up, that's not the same thing. Okay, it's based on this somatic empathy. So it kind of brings you around full circle what I'm talking about, that the skill is in you to learn to join with the other person. But of course, then you have the students who are learning to become malleable on the inside. You then have a responsibility to train them how to focus that malleability. So say I took a student and I taught them how everything's mobilizing inside. And that's it. Didn't give them any direction. They just become highly mobile. When we touch, I can do whatever I want to them. Okay, there's nothing they can do. Because I can harmonize, they cannot. So what you have to do is take the student, teach them to mobilize the inside, but then build the correct patterns and lines inside their body, the Jinlu if you like, and various other things, so that when it mobilizes in the correct direction, so that they don't just become puppets to be thrown around. They become people that can actually learn how to join. And this is why joining is, like, to me, one of the most important parts of that side of Taiji. So there's probably a million other thoughts to look at in there, but I do have to get somewhere, and I just wanted to put this on video because I think there's lots of queries about this. I'm aware that lots of people who do Tai Chi push hands who don't believe in this kind of stuff will find all of this complete bullshit, and fair enough. That's okay. I kind of get it. Looking at it from the outside, it does look like bullshit. And I will say, in the defense of the people that think it's bullshit, the ones just doing very physical push hands, you know, like wrestling style push hands or something, I'm not taking away from that. I think it takes a lot of effort, and I think it has a lot of place. And I train a lot of that kind of, and historically I've trained a lot of that kind of martial arts too, striking, grappling, locking, because I enjoy it and I think it's really good. I think that even though all these really interesting internal sides of Tai Chi exist, it doesn't mean you have to do them to the complete exclusion of the other stuff, to the physical stuff. And at the same time, if you're really into the physical stuff and the grappling and the striking and all that, you don't have to study that to the exclusion of the interesting phenomena of the eternal arts. I think it's great to study both of them. And even if your interest is combat, and this phenomena here with the subtle touch might be very difficult to apply in a competitive arena, you never know. You might be one of the ones that manages to do it, but I wouldn't bank on it. So therefore, you should still study the practical stuff as well. There is a common sense thing to approaching all of these arts. But it was really what I want to highlight, that in Tai Chi, the function of Qi is inside of your own body to mobilize and rearrange the tissues according to what your mind and nerves are doing, so that you can touch and join with the other person to harmonize, so that their power can't land on you and whatever the other things that we study are. That's what it is, not doing it in the other person. It's only my opinion, it's only my experience, but I've been seeing increasing amounts of videos or instruction coming out from people saying that the Fajin is done in the other person. Like you grab them and you touch all their joints and you release or something, it's not really, it's done in you. And even if you can do it in the other person, which you can't on a very non-compliant, non-somatically empathetic person, but even if you could, you're not getting any cultivation benefit from it. It's only, think about it from a higher perspective. If you're doing something to change you, then every practice must change you. If you're doing something to change you, but you're obsessed with doing it in the other person's body all the time, it's not changing you. So therefore, you kind of miss out on a lot of the benefits of that kind of practice. So I'll finish there. Maybe a little hard to follow and maybe a little bit niche. We'll see, but yeah. Thanks.